Hey. Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome my dear friend Neil Lewis, the empathy coach, for a chat this morning. At Get Scouted, we're passionate about helping parents support their children on their sporting journey. And our chat this morning will be the first of many conversations and resources that will do this. Our chat will focus on how to support your child through the disappointments that happen in everyday life and what you can do as a parent to help this process. Good morning, Neil. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. Looking forward to this.
Me too. I'm delighted about our conversation, and I'm really excited and really happy that you've agreed to join us this morning. So I know you've done some prep, as you always do, because you're always well prepared for every conversation that you have. And I guess the main thread of the conversation this morning will be around disappointment that we all feel, not just as adults, but also as children. But in the formative years, I guess we have an opportunity as parents to help the behavioural patterns that we put into our children. And I guess they're the big things that I'd really like to explore with you this morning. So I guess first and foremost, if you could share a little bit about your background in terms of your journey to become the empathy coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try and shorthand this as best I can. And so my background is primarily in learning and development. That's where my career has been for the last 23 years. Oh, scary. And I guess in terms of my journey with empathy, if you like, that probably started around about 21 years ago when I first went on a customer service training program. I was first introduced to this concept of empathy, and then shortly after started training out those customer service programs and training out empathy, and thought I'd nailed it back then. Little did I know, but because conceptually, a lot of people have heard this word empathy, and we perhaps have an understanding of it or a definition of it. Which is usually quite straightforward, something along the lines of stepping into somebody else's shoes, or kind of going into somebody else's world, if that makes sense. And so as a concept, it's quite simple. In practice, very, very tricky. And I didn't learn this particular nugget until many, many years later. I was fortunate that my career took me into, because of being in learning and development, you naturally go into that space of learning more about human behavior, learning more about how people learn, learning more about people's unique approach. I consider myself very privileged to have had the opportunity to get my head around this stuff that a lot of people don't, because they don't go into that area of business. Emotional intelligence isn't something that they teach at school. It isn't something that they teach in a lot of workplaces. It has been a big part of my career. And then about 6 years ago, I started working with a group of psychotherapists who were wanting to bring the more accessible elements of psychotherapy to the masses, if you like. So actually, there's some great stuff in psychotherapy that can help leaders and can help workers that deal with problematic individuals, police officers, social workers, people like that. And I was invited to work with this group of people to help translate that sort of psychotherapeutic knowledge and skill to a wider audience, and then also consider how you train that out as well. These are psychotherapists, they weren't trainers. So and it was then that I actually learned what empathy really is. Because in psychotherapy, it's the key skill that psychotherapists and counselors use. They use it to build relationships really quickly. They use it to establish trust. They use it to encourage open and honest sharing of how people are feeling. It is absolutely a counsellor and psychotherapist's bread and butter to be a truly empathic practitioner. And that's where I learned what being truly empathic really was. And I'm working with this team of people. We're very privileged and humbled to work with social care, adult social care, children's social care, the police, paramedics, medical staff, substance intervention workers, and people dealing with addiction, and all around how you employ empathy as a very practical skill to connect with people and to influence people, and actually to to help rebuild people. I mean, the biggest challenge facing a lot of those industries is not managing problematic behavior, but helping people to turn it around. So
Yeah.
they, so they can kick their addictions, they can step away from criminal activity and all that stuff. And actually, the only way to do that is to actually rebuild people from kind of the ground up. We can put sticking plasters and throw sort of solutions to problems in place, but if a person's fundamentally broken, that's not going to work. It's about actually rebuilding people. And one of the key lessons for me in working with this was actually learning at how at quite a young age people can get quite broken.
Yeah.
And it can often be because in their formative years, their childhood, they haven't been responded to in the best way. And yeah, and I guess that's, so working with children, social care, working with schools, which again were key audiences that we work with. It was about how do you respond to the people that you're working with, people that you're supporting with, in the best possible way that still allows them to grow, still allows them to move, still teaches them right from wrong, but doesn't kind of in the process do perhaps some invisible damage that we didn't mean to do or we didn't know we'd done, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I guess that's led me to the empathy coach, to actually just a deep passion for empathic practice and empathic connection in relationships. And as you know now, my specialty in terms of coaching and learning is around empathic practice, and how we not just how we understand empathy, but how we practically apply it to every relationship that we have in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So, given sort of the things that Get Scouted want to deliver, so obviously we've got our events, which are very difficult to do at the minute, given we are in lockdown 3.0 and we don't know when we're coming out. Hopefully mid-February, end of February. We're still really passionate about providing, parents with insight that can support them, not just in a sporting environment, but in an everyday environment. And I guess, the conversation that, we're going to have this morning is around managing disappointment. So understanding how a child views disappointment, and then also as a parent, how can we support them through that disappointment without necessarily jumping in and doing the typical parent things that, I've always done. As a parent, you don't want to see your child in pain. You don't want to see them suffer through disappointment. But I guess my question to you is, what is the most effective way as a parent that we can help our children through that without imposing our own views?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. And as you know, when we first started talking about this, really excited to explore this topic. And I just, depending on when you're watching this, whether you're watching this at the time it was filmed or whether you're watching it after, just a big shout out to all the parents right now who are homeschooling and who have just been, what a time and what a test, I think, to everybody that's out there doing the best they can right now. And I think that I do want to kind of zone in on that statement that everybody's doing the best they can. We can be incredibly self-critical. We can be critical of others. We can be very comparative in terms of, how's that family getting on versus how my family's getting on. And one of the things that I always kind of want to impress upon people is that we're all doing the best we can right now. We're doing the best we can with what we've got. There might be help out there. There might be support out there, things that we can reach for that will help us do a different job or enhance the job that we're doing. But everybody's doing the best they can right now. So I just kind of want to shout that out. And I guess it leads very much into another sort of key rule that I kind of, or principle that I want everyone out there that's watching this to get right now, and that is every behavior has a positive intention.
Yeah.
So as parents, everything that we do will be will be derived from trying to create harmony within our family, trying to create boundaries within our family, trying to create structure and routine, and like we say, get through and do the best we can. So what I don't want is to kind of get to the end of this interview and people be thinking, oh God, I'm a crap parent. That's not the case at all. Everything that everybody's doing, you know, every behavior has a positive intention. And very much like what you were just saying then, Simon, you know, a parent, for a lot of parents, it's really hard to see their child in pain. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. One, because I hurt when they hurt. Two, actually, when they hurt, there's usually, there might be a big display of behavior that actually affects the rest of the household, and therefore we want to try and diffuse that behavior for any number of reasons. As parents, we're trying to balance and manage all of that, and we're trying to keep that sort of on track, if you like. So I want you to, I just want everyone out there just watching this to keep that in mind, that this is not about whether you're a good parent or a bad parent. You're a parent that's doing the best you can right now. What I kind of want to touch on today is perhaps looking at some of the ways that we can do things, effect that it might have on our children, and very inadvertently, very unintentionally have on our children. And I want to just start by talking about something called a self-concept. So the self-concept is, we all have a self-concept, and it comes to us from birth. And essentially our self-concept is it's an internal working model that we develop, that everybody develops, and particularly in relation to other people. And it's a set of general assumptions, and it's essentially how I see myself in relation to other people, and how I see myself in relation to the world around me.
Right.
So there's those three very sort of clear things, and they're a set of general rules. So there might be some deviation in there. I might be able to see myself slightly differently in relation to my parents, but how I see myself in relation to my peers, how I see myself in relation to my teachers, how I see myself in relation to my colleagues as I get older, because it's always with us as well. It starts in childhood, but it stays with us. And actually, the foundation of it is absolutely in childhood. And I'm sure it will come as no surprise to everybody that how that self-concept originates about how I see myself and how I see myself in relation to others is very much derived from the home environment. Because if I think about myself in relation to others, the first people that I can relate to, the first other people are likely my parents or primary caregivers, if that makes sense. So how I see other people, how easy I find it to trust other people, how easy I find it to accept feedback from other people, is very much derived from how that happens at home. And how that comes from my parents. So I kind of want to keep that in mind, that actually how we set our children up in this situation can either set them up to succeed, or it can set them up to fail. It's very much about how we respond to them. And because of that, a parent's reaction to children, it is important, because it's not just about instilling discipline or making sure they understand the way things are in this family, the culture in this family. It's also creating that internal working model that child will then take with them throughout their lives. So I think two things I wanted to touch on here of why a parent's reaction in any situation is important, because to a child, besides their own feelings, the only other feelings that matter are the feelings of their parent.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
How my parent feels and how I see them feeling, it's probably one of the most important things in the world to me, because a child's world's very small. To get to expand the way an adult's world has into finance and career and friends and
all the stresses that come with it.
Yeah, all that stuff that God that gets heaped on us as we get older. Actually, a child's world is very, very small, and it usually encompasses themselves and their immediate family. So apart from their own feelings, the only other feelings that are really important to them are their parents.
Yeah.
And then the second reason why a parent's reaction is so important, and this will probably again come as no surprise to a lot of you, is around modeling. Because actually a child's first experiences of how to handle situations comes from what they see and what is modeled by the people around them. So whether a parent is accepting of feelings or whether a parent is dismissive of feelings will be something that is modeled to that child, and therefore something that they will take forward. So I think it's really important to touch on those two things. So I guess that's kind of the foundation. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Great. Okay. So then if we map that now into early experiences and significant early experiences, again, a child's world is very small. So something that might be quite insignificant or minute to us as adults, as parents, actually to the child can be massive.
Right. Okay.
And we might look at it with adult eyes and think, oh God, you're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just a Lego set that you broke, or it's just a headband that you've lost, or something like that. But to the child, because their world is so small, that thing is so big. And I think if we consider that, any kind of potential career in sport, thinking about Get Scouted, thinking about football or any particular sport, this can be a place where disappointment can happen. Great success can happen, absolutely, but disappointment can happen as well. And again, if we consider that children are forming these experiences perhaps for the first time, great success to a child can be absolutely intoxicating. They've never experienced it before. This is amazing. This is brilliant. Everyone's saying how great I am, and my parents are smiling at me, and my friends are clapping for me, and all this stuff. Very, very intoxicating. The flip side to that is that disappointment can be crushing. Because again, there's no kind of resilience been built yet, if you like. And not to mention the fact that a lot of parents, and again from a very well-intended place, can heap praise, lots of praise on children in order to encourage, but at some point that disappointment may well come. And it's remembering that to a child it might be massive. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to build fear in young people. We want to create resilience. And I don't mean by that we take that approach of, oh, get over it, toughen up, thicken your skin, all that kind of stuff. That's not about creating resilience. Actually, that is inadvertently creating fear around emotions.
Okay, that's interesting.
You know what I mean? It's almost like ignoring emotions or invalidating emotions, invalidating how you feel, isn't about necessarily building a thick skin. Actually, what it's building is a resistance to emotions. And ultimately a fear of emotions. Emotions are scary. Bad things happen when I feel bad. I get shouted at, or I get dismissed, or I get told to get over it. And what can develop then is an unhealthy relationship with emotions, which absolutely carries through to adulthood. Massively so. The way to build resilience, would you believe, is to acknowledge. It's to acknowledge the emotion that the child is feeling, and that's not to collude. There's a very fine line between acknowledge and collude. This isn't about agreeing with the way the child feels. It's about accepting and acknowledging the way the child feels. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, putting it into context of sport, your child's playing sport and they make a mistake. They pass the ball to the wrong person and the other team scores a goal. They accidentally foul somebody, or they maybe intentionally foul somebody, because they're still checking those boundaries when it comes to the game, as children do. And again, it's really easy in that situation for us as adults who've got a very clear idea of what's right and what's wrong, to be quite harsh and judgmental on a child who is actually not got the same level of clarity around what's right and what's wrong. They're still testing, and any parent will know this, that their children push the boundaries, but it's not about being. Children aren't doing that to be, for want of a better word, little shits. Children are doing it because they're finding their way in the world. They're finding their place in the world. So they will push those boundaries. And what's interesting is that, do we judge that, or do we unpick that with them? Do we ask them why? Why did you do that? Because I kind of get a sense that that wasn't quite right. So I'm wondering why you did it. And in doing that, we might know why as adults, but they haven't got a clue. It's giving them the opportunity to explore. It's giving them the opportunity to unpick and start to rationalize some of this stuff in their own mind. But just going back to what I said at the beginning, they make a mistake, they do something wrong, and actually they feel it, and you can see disappointment. There might even be tears, quite common with young children, that you would see like an outward display of emotion. And how we respond to that is absolutely critical. And the best way to respond to that is to acknowledge how they're feeling, in so much as, I can see that this has really upset you, or I can see that you're incredibly disappointed by this. And there's always a temptation with parents to go, but I can see this has really disappointed you, but you've just got to get over it. I can see that you're really upset about this, but you know what? Bad things happen in life. And it's, again, it comes from well-intended places. We're trying to toughen our kids up. We're trying to build resilience, trying to thicken their skins, all that kind of stuff. But actually, when we add that but, it kind of negates the empathy that came before it. A bit of a trap, really. There's what we need to get into the habit of doing is saying to our kids, do you know what? I can see that you're really gutted about this, and leave it. Just stand with them in that being gutted for a moment. Allow them to feel gutted for a moment. Allow them to process that emotion, and create a sense of safety around feeling. As parents, we want to rush our kids through this stuff because we don't want them to be in peril. We don't want them to hurt. It hurts us to see them hurt. So what we do is, to overcome that, is we rush them through. Or another classic thing that we do, and again, well-intended, solution. We throw all kinds of fixes and all these things, and often what we're trying to do is we're trying to put a silver lining around things really, really quickly. We're trying to move kids to that space of being okay really, really quickly. Now, the subconscious message that sends to the burgeoning self-concept is, oh, it's not okay for me to feel this way. I need to get out of it quickly. And actually, what the life lesson that comes with that is that there are certain emotions that are not okay. There are certain emotions that I shouldn't feel, and therefore what I start to develop is a fear of those emotions. Now, what happens over time is I will generally only feel those emotions when I fail, or when I make a mistake. When I learn a lesson, really, we should be saying to kids, but actually, if I only feel those emotions when I fail, the fear of those emotions actually starts to translate into a fear of failure. So actually, what that can do is it can mean that I'm less inclined to take risks. I'm less inclined to try things. I'm less inclined to be brave, because actually there isn't a tolerance for failure, either from myself or from the people around me, my parents, my caregivers. There's no tolerance for failure. So what happens there is I might get into a space where I play it safe, or I might get into a space of where I'm in a situation where I might fail. It's terrifying. It's crippling. And then consider how that then might affect the game. If you think about even as adults, when we need to function, if we're functioning with fear and we're worried about something or we're scared of something, it does affect our performance.
Can I ask a quick question then? So does that then lead to potentially flight, fight, or freeze in those situations?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's fear. I mean, we can probably a bigger conversation, but just while we're talking, if we can generally boil every negative experience or reaction down to fear. You know, when we get angry, there's likely fear at the base of it. We're angry with somebody because we feel that they've threatened us or whatever that might be. It comes from fear. You can generally boil it all down to fear. And then, like you say, the fear response kicks in.
Right.
And it's really interesting. So the flight response, if you like, would be to play it safe, to not be brave, to withdraw or to pull back. The fight response is actually, especially with children, really worrying, because actually that's where risks are taken, but perhaps you know, very questionable risks would be taken. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to develop that sense of stability. I mean, the top and bottom of it is that this could be happening, and again, no parent is intending for it to happen. I want to go back to that. Every behavior has a positive intention.
Yeah.
No parent is intending for it to happen, but I want to just get really clear on what ignoring or dismissing or not validating how a child feels, how that can create fear in the child, if that makes sense. And we think we're avoiding fear, but actually we're really...
So I guess what my listening to you, it's almost give yourself permission to give the child permission, because it's about creating a different narrative or a different story in the child's head and the child's psyche, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, if I think about, you know, and again, as adults, one of the things I'm sure we can all relate to is that actually the really powerful lessons that we've learned are the life lessons. You know, I'm not dissing education. Education's really important. It's really important to children. It's really important for that foundation, but equally important are the life lessons.
Yeah.
And those disappointments, particularly those early disappointments, are massive life lessons. Again, like I said, to us, it's a tiny thing, but in the tiny world of a child, it's massive. So therefore, it is something that can stay with them. And it's so important that we acknowledge what's happened from their perspective. And this is where empathy comes in. You know, we look at that situation as adults, as parents, and think, well, that's no big deal. But being truly empathic is actually stepping into your child's world. So actually, to them, is this a big deal? And actually, yeah, it is. Do you know what it is? And whether I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because to them, it is a big deal. And as a parent, the best thing that I can do is to go and sit with them in that.
Yeah.
And let them go through that process, because what happens there is if we give a child an opportunity to feel how they feel and come through it, the subconscious life lesson they learn is, I can overcome strong emotions.
Yeah.
I don't have to be afraid of them. No one's rushing them away. No one's putting plasters on. No one's telling me I shouldn't feel the way I feel. I'm feeling the way I feel, and I'm overcoming it.
Yeah.
And then the next time I feel it, I'm not so scared of it, because I know that it will pass, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that's how we learn a tolerance for disappointment and a tolerance for negative emotions, rather than a fear of disappointment and negative emotions.
So I guess, you know, what we're saying is experience is the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
And by sitting with your child and looking at it through their eyes, and not putting your preconceived judgment, because, you know, we've all lived very different lives and we'll live different lives to our children. And I guess it's taking that step back and thinking what might be right for me, or how I might handle this situation, could be completely different from my child, especially, as we've said, a child in their formative years. And then I guess we're then building the story and the narrative through to teenage years, and then adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the other big challenges that I've found with parents that I've worked with and families that I've worked with, and particularly working with social care and working with adoptive parents and foster families, and it's interesting. Adoptive parents and foster families are far more open to the notion that the child that has been placed in their care might not be like them.
Yeah.
And therefore they tend to be more adaptable to the child. And that's because there's a very clear reason why the child isn't like them, and that's because they're not from them.
Yeah.
Biological parents can struggle with children that aren't like them.
Right.
It's confusing. It's like, it's almost like, I'm bearing in mind that we're not just we're talking here about things like personality. We're talking here about things like values and beliefs. This is not stuff that is hardwired. It's not stuff that's genetic, if you like. Or actually, personality is hardwired, but it's not genetic. So therefore, you know, a child could have a completely different personality and a completely different approach to life than their parents. But actually, and what this can cause is confusion on both parts as well. A parent might not understand why their child behaves the way that they do. And likewise, a child may feel incredibly odd because they behave and respond differently to the way their parent does, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that can cause quite a lot of conflict in those formative years. And you know, again, not to put all the onus on the parent here, but one of the big lessons that I kind of unpick when I'm working with parents and with families and adoptive parents and foster families as well, is that actually the responsibility we take on as parents is not to forge our children into our own image. It's to adapt to who our children are. And we do that because actually we're the adults. You know, we're the ones that have got more of a developed and evolved skill around doing that. Child hasn't got a clue how to do that. And what you might find is a child that becomes quite compliant, so copies mum and dad, or dad and dad, or mum and mum, or whoever, copies their parent because that's what's modeled to them, but it doesn't fundamentally sit right with them.
Right.
Because actually what they're modeling is not necessarily who, or what they're copying of what's been modeled isn't necessarily who they are. And it's so important for parents to allow their children to become who they are and to develop who they are. And if they do respond differently or react differently, it isn't about making that child not respond that way or respond like the parent does. It's about helping the child understand why they respond that way. And actually, as a parent, understanding yourself why they respond that way, and accepting that this human being, they're from you, but they are not you.
Yes.
You know, and it's keeping that in your mind and thinking, what are the things I want to teach them? Actually, do I want to teach them how to behave to the nth degree, or do I want to teach them how to navigate life without fear and with excitement and with trepidation? And when it comes to sport, there's so much pressure and it's such a competitive game. And it's almost like, and we had this conversation, didn't we, earlier in the week? I wonder if everybody aligned themselves to the joy they get from what they're doing, rather than the fear attached to it. Would they actually bring their best game? You know, if a child's rocking up to one of your events and there's going to be scouts there, there's going to be other kids there that might be better than me or whatever, and there's all that fear that they're bringing into one of your events. How can they bring their A game if actually what they're bringing to your event is, I'm just coming to do what I love? And actually, it doesn't matter to me who else is there. It doesn't matter. All I've got to do is just come and do what I love and do what I'm really good at, you know, and whatever happens, the life lesson that our children are learning is that whatever happens, as long as you do the best you can right now, then that's all you can ask of yourself.
And then I guess as a consequence of that, we are naturally braver and we take risks, but the right kind of risks. So I guess in a sporting context, you don't play within yourself because there are no shackles, there is no fear. You know, going back to that fear word, that, you know, I'm comfortable that provided I do my best and I enjoy it, no matter what happens, the support framework around me will give me the permission and the support that I need.
Yeah, absolutely. And the permission to, and this is why I was saying earlier, it's not about a fear of failure, it's about a tolerance for failure, because actually, you know, we only learn through failure. We don't, like we say, those life lessons that we learn that are so important, we learn them through failure, through things going wrong, and then our ability to evaluate the things that have gone wrong and accept the things that have gone wrong and learn the lesson from it, you know. And if you think about the brightest minds these days, the most innovative and creative thinkers in our world, you know, the people who are, you know, sending rockets up into space and people who are creating these incredible sustainable energy sources, actually they're failing hourly.
Yeah,
You know,
you're
they're
right.
failing all the time. But actually, if they don't fail, they don't learn, and we don't progress.
Yeah,
And we don't improve, and that's the point. And a fear of failure means that actually people can potentially then be afraid of learning. You know, afraid of, because actually what happens if I make a mistake is it's so crippling and it's so awful to see my parents disappointed or to feel their disappointment, that actually I'm not going to take that chance. I'm not going to take,
no,
and therefore I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to go through life being afraid.
yeah,
And yeah, and again, and it's so hard, I think, sometimes as parents to hear this, because no parent wants to create a fearful child. That's never the intention at all. But it is sometimes about taking that step out, saying, actually, what am I creating in the way that I respond to my child?
yeah,
Am I creating bravery? Am I creating resilience? Or am I inadvertently creating fear?
yeah. And it's almost, I guess, getting out of the way of yourself.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it is. It really is.
Yeah, yeah,
It's,
that
and it's the
really,
hardest thing to do, Simon, because we are, you know, the life lessons that we have as adults and as parents, they're really important to us. Our
yeah,
experiences are really important to us. The lessons that we've learned are really important to us. But sometimes, in trying to instill the lessons we've learned on our children, we're robbing them of the opportunity to learn their own lessons. Does that
yeah,
make sense?
perfect sense,
Mm.
absolute sense. Neil, so if I was to take one golden nugget out of this conversation, if I held one thing that I took forward, because I've got two boys, both play football, they both love it, they both enjoy it. What would be your biggest piece of advice to me as a parent of competitive sporting boys in their adolescent years?
It would be to encourage during the good times and support during the tough times. And what I would urge you to try, well, I don't need to urge you to try, because I know you do this, Simon, but anyone out there that's watching, just to try once. The next time your child is in crisis or peril or distress or whatever that might be, put a pin in your desire to move through that really, really quickly, or to fix that, or to solve that, and just go and stand with them in it. Just go and sit next to them, put your arm around them and say, God, this is really shit, or this
Yeah,
is really tough, you know, and I can see that this is really bothering you. And leave it and just sit with them, because they will stop crying. and what they will come out of that with is a much stronger sense of emotions can be overcome. I can get past this. You know, it's a much more powerful lesson. So that would be my one nugget. I'd just ask everybody out, and I know it'll be hard because you'll want to say, shut up, or you're driving me mad, or I've got 3 other kids that are climbing the walls. I know it'll be hard. I do not want to, I cannot stress enough that empathy is difficult.
Yeah.
You know, there's been studies in empathic parenting, and in control groups, they've found that the cortisol levels in the empathic parents are higher because it is stressful for the parent, but it reaps massive rewards for the child. So my one nugget is encourage during the good times, acknowledge and praise during the good times, support during the bad times, and the next time your child is in peril, just go and sit with them in it for a few minutes.
Neil, that's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your time this morning. And I know we will speak soon. So thanks again. I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. I certainly did. It was a wonderful conversation and very, very insightful. And I will certainly take some things forward to work with my things on. So thank you again, Neil. Thank you for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.